Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to go on the Swordis website and get a custom Shadow Dancer katana, and I'm going to talk about the choices that I'm making, what the other choices are, why I'm making the choices I am, and then I'm going to evaluate the sword at the end of it. Now, the goal of this video is really to help people who are looking at the Shadow Dancer line, the middle tier of custom katana options on the Swordis website. If you're a buyer like that, hopefully this video will go over all the options that they currently have available and help you make the right decisions about which ones you want and don't want. I'm also going to talk about why I bought what I bought, and hopefully it is helpful in helping you make a decision. Now, I do want to preface that this is a review sample that's going to be sent to me. I'm not being paid to actually make the video, but I do get the review sample, so think of that and infer what biases you will, but I'm going to try and be objective and helpful. And anyway, that's the things you need to know. Now, before I go into the rest of the options, do know, again, my goal, have something I can hand to new students so that I'm confident that it's not going to break, it's not going to snap, it's going to be forgiving, stay straight. So I want something durable. I also want something that is going to be cool looking, which means to me bedazzled with swirly mitsudomes as much as possible. And then I want something that is comfortable to use for Iaido and will do that kind of stuff well. And I'm going to try not to break the bank. I'm going to try not to click yes on every single box and be a little bit more selective. But it's not going to be the cheapest one, but it's not going to be the most expensive one. That's the goal anyway. So this is a mid-tier option. I'm shooting for the kind of middle of this mid-tier. And if we go to the Swordis website and I stop just babbling about what I'm going to do and actually start doing it, we'll see the website here, and up in the corner there's this custom katana option. I really like how they lay things out, and I also like this. There's swirly mitsudome fittings. I'm already salivating a little bit here because those are very pretty. Now at the bottom here we see the low end. Low is not the right word, the entry level, if you will, to be a little bit more kind, $200 to $800, $400 to $3,000 or $500 to $3,000 for the middle tier, the Shadow Dancer. That's what we're going to be going over today. And then the Zisei is starting at over $2,000 and going up to the moon. So we're going to focus on this one here. I might make other videos about the other builders, but today this is just going to be laser focused on the Shadow Dancer side, the mid-tier stuff. And I'm going to be shooting for somewhere towards the lower end, middle end of this budget range here. So, I'm going to try. It's probably going to be a $5,000 sword. 3 more things. 1, there's a coupon code. It's Matthew Custom 10, and use this if you want to buy a sword on Swordis. It saves you 10%. I don't get any kickback from it. It's not financially at all for me, but it saves you some money. It's 10%. That's a meaningful amount of money because it's money, and money is useful for things. The next thing, I screwed up some things in this video. I tried to put notes on the screen. I don't want to re-record all of it. I put notes down below as well. There's some things that were mixy, but regardless, there's notes on the screen. Hopefully you find it helpful. If it's too confusing, let me know and I will cry. The next bit is, I'm really curious what you guys think, honestly. If there are more things throughout the course of this video that you think would provide more context for a buyer, like, hey, I missed something, some important factor about a choice, throw it down below in the commentary. It's helpful for people that are looking at swords and want to buy them and don't know stuff. The other bit is, what do you think at the end of the video? Did the sword meet your expectations? As you were seeing what I was choosing, did the thing that came out the other end meet your expectations? Were there things that you would have done differently? I'm also curious what you would like to build or what things you find particularly exciting. That's more than 3 things, but it's kind of 3 topics. I'm going to stop. On with the video. All right, so the first thing to pick is the steel type. There's a lot of steel types here, and as I understand it, there's later options for if you want differentially hardened blades or through hardened blades. Note that differentially hardened or through hardened is going to probably make one of the larger differences in how your blade reacts, as in how durable is it. Through hardened blades tend to be very durable. Differentially hardened blades tend to hold an edge better if you're doing harder cutting. The edge will last a little bit longer, but at the same time, it makes it much more susceptible to bending and staying bent. It also makes it a little bit more fragile, less likely to withstand really rigorous abuse. Through hardened blades are a little bit more likely to take that. Comes at the cost of some edge retention. They still hold an edge quite well, but not as well as their differentially hardened counterparts. That decision, I think, is a little later, so I don't know why I'm talking about it now, but to note that is a big factor. Here, the type of steel, I'll let you know that there are some here that have lasted longer and some that I'm unfamiliar with. I'll go over a little bit, but there's these tool tips here that might give you some information as well. 1045 tends to be soft. I see it more used on really budget-oriented katanas. At the same time, it can make a very good sword. 9260 tends to be around the same thing, though I tend to see it used exclusively in through hardened blades. I find that it holds an edge quite well, that it resists breaking quite well, but it usually does tend to be on the more budget swords that are used. But it's quite resilient. It tends not to take a set, though. Once it breaks, it tends to break spectacularly, in the sense that I don't get the vibes this sword is going to break until it does, and that's usually what happens when I'm using 9260. It seems like it's rock solid until it isn't. Though, no, I'm not saying that they break easy. I'm breaking these intentionally when I do these tests, and 9260 just doesn't give you a lot of sign that things are going badly. T8 and 1095 tend to be very similar, along with T10 if you see that come up as an option. I don't find that these swords tend to be much different between each other. They hold an edge really well. They can be very, very good swords, but they show a hamon well, and I often see them used in differentially hardened blades versus through hardened blades. Damascus, this is a little different. Up until this point, we've been kind of talking about homogeneous steels in the sense that it's all one thing. So a Damascus steel is one that's going to have these little wavy patterns in it. Maybe I can zoom in on this photo. There's going to be some characteristics in the steel that are perhaps interesting to look at. So I'm not going to be choosing this steel because I'm looking for something through hardened and mono steel, as in one homogeneous kind of steel, and I'm focusing on durability, not the artistic side or the historical side of the blade. But if you wanted something maybe a little bit bougier looking, that had a little bit more character, something a little more traditional looking, then a Damascus style steel, a folded steel, might do that for you. S5 and S7 steel are very close to each other. I've broken some S7 swords, and they have been the hardest swords to break. Swords made of S7, and supposedly S5 is even harder to break. Now, at this point, I've not intentionally broken an S5 sword, so I can't say that, but I can say I want to try it. So that's what I'm gonna select. I'm not actually gonna break this one. The point is, though, that it's supposed to be harder than S7, so that's why I'm choosing it. Not harder is the wrong word, because that can be conflated with edge hardness and how hard the sword is. As I understand it, it's actually a little softer than S7, but it takes the type of shock, the type of abuse that a new student might throw at it, even better than S7 does, which has been some of the toughest steel that I've gotten a chance to test. So I'm gonna pick the S5 variety. They're very similar, but that seems like the right choice for me because I've really liked how durable S7 was, and if it's even better, sign me up. Now, Woots and Crucible steel are a little different. I don't actually know what Shadow Dancer is doing to make these, but presumably there's some sort of specialized process, and I have had a sword made of the Crucible steel from Zisei, which is a company they have some sort of affiliation with, I guess I'll say. I don't know if they're the same place or not, but they share some tools and knowledge and some similarities. Zisei tends to do higher end stuff. The lowest end sword I've seen from Zisei was made of a Crucible steel, and it did have some metallurgical effects on the surface of the steel that were pleasant to look at. It looked like a historical blade, even though it wasn't a folded blade. It had similar kind of patterns in the structure of the steel. So I'm not sure about the Woots. The Crucible steel wasn't specifically durable, but it did have a kind of an interesting look to it. I got it in a very light sword, and it held up reasonably well, but it was also, it would bend, and it would it would do those kind of things because it's a very thin sword. So it's not like a super steel. I believe this is more of a looks thing than a performance thing. Now, I could be wrong on that, but that's my impression of it. The LD and ZXN275J, I don't know much about these steels or what makes them special. There could be something very awesome about them. I have no personal firsthand experience with them, but these tooltips will probably change as new cool steels come around. My goal with this sword is durability. I know S7 is durable. I've heard S5 is the bee's knees, so that's what I'm going to choose. Now, length. This is an important factor for any swordsman, maybe. If you're a collector, you don't care, you don't have any preferences on length, or maybe you like a variety, you can pick the standard. If you want more length, though, it's going to cost you more money, and I am choosing between 30 and 30 and a half inches long. Now, this is an extra $200, which is not nothing, but there's not a lot of sword companies out there, honestly, that offer a lot of variety in the size. And if you do have a specific size that you like, then I like that this option is available. And if you don't care, then you can stick with not adding an extra pile of money. But this is admittedly not an inexpensive upgrade. What it will do for me, though, is be a good practice tool for me. If swords are less than this length, if it's less than about 30 inches long, measured from the tip to the munmachi on the blade. Doesn't include the habaki, so blade length to some might be closer to 31. But if I don't have a sword that's this length, then when I draw and sheathe the sword, I can cheat. I don't have to move my hip, I don't have to pull the scabbard off the sword, and I don't have to do the technique correctly, and I often then don't, and I build bad habits. So having a sword that's this length forces my body to do some of the techniques that I'm trying to do well. It forces them to be done correctly because I can't cheat. So that's why this is good. Now, any longer than this, if it's too much longer, like over a 32.5, I start hitting the floor when I do some of the movements I'm used to. But 30, I can still crouch pretty low and not whack the floor. So I'm good. That's the length that I would like. I could do a little longer, a little shorter is also okay, but I'm gonna shoot for this one. Now, cutting edge, unsharpened. If you're doing EI, you don't want a sharp edge. I'd imagine it doesn't come really wide and blunt. It's still probably sharper than nothing, as in I wouldn't want to get hit with it. It can still be a very effective weapon, even unsharpened, because it will probably have an edge profile, but not the final edge put on it. But do know that that's good for Iaido. If you're practicing, you're not going to slice your digits off by touching your sword. But it would still hurt if you hit somebody with it. So I don't want to confuse it for not a weapon if it's in the unsharpened status. Anyway, without Niku, these visuals are I think really helpful. So this is the profile of the blade without Niku. It's just got a flat edge on it. With Niku, adds a chunk of money at $150, and this visual I think does a solid job of adding this reddened area here. The edge is apple seated. What does that do? It makes the edge more resilient on hard target cutting. So with no Niku, cutting bamboo or drier wood is a little risky. No Niku on a thinner blade, if I strike the neck of water bottles, it's a lot more likely to bend or chip or something like that. So if you're cutting just water bottles, pool noodles, tatami mats, no Niku is really required. But when you do bamboo, sapling, whack into an occasional 2x4, you put oak dowels maybe in the middle of your targets, or some even of the thick neck of water bottles. This apple-seated edge can give the edge enough reinforcement to not be damaged when doing some of those cuts. They can all be very, very sharp, but this gives you some indication that it's got a little bit of extra meat on the bone, something to reinforce the edge, where that's how it applies in kind of normal target cutting. If I were to go whack a metal pole with this or hit somebody in armor, something without Niku might damage the edge. The edge might become gouged like up to 2 millimeters, maybe even a little bit more. But usually if I whack a metal pole with a sword with Niku in it, and I'm not, doing with everything I have, it only damages like less than 1 millimeter into the edge, and it's a lot easier to clean those up even after you've gone through a bit of a battle. So it's not an inexpensive amount of money, but it does a meaningful thing. I'd imagine this is what they're charging because they're hopefully going to do it right. Now, I'm trying to keep on budget, and my targets are pool noodles, water bottles, and tatami mats. I can avoid some of the harder target cutting and save the money here for the practice tool. It's not required for Iaido. It's not required for the type of targets that I cut. I'd like it. If I were going to war with the sword, I'd choose Niku, but I'm not, and so I don't need it. I'll save the money here. Now, the blade construction, I like that these are grayed out, incidentally. So we've got Maru, that's one solid kind of steel. I chose S5 steel. It's only available in Maru, or just one homogeneous kind of steel, or mono steel, as it's sometimes called. These other options, Kobusei and Sanmai, are different ways to combine different kinds of steel. So presumably if I chose a 1095 option, or one of the other steels, then I would be able to choose Sanmai and have that steel combined with another one. Now, in theory, this allows you to have the edge retention of something like 1095 and the softness and kind of flexibility of something softer like 1045 or some other kind of, maybe the Damascus steel or something like that. You have a really hard edge on just the edge, and it's homogeneous and clean and good, and then you have Damascus and folded steel on the sides to make it look a little bit more traditional, but at the core it has a homogeneous, really hard steel. So that could be beneficial. It could give you something that looks really nice and also something that holds an edge really quite well. In practice, I haven't found these to be more durable. So that's really the punchline that I'd say is you would choose something like this because you want the tie to history, you like the aesthetic effect, but it's not objectively better, or at least it isn't in practice, mine specifically. I'm sure on paper or scientifically there's one way to prove what's going to do the job better, but I haven't found in practice that they hold an edge meaningfully better, or that they withstand punishment better. So I don't think that these lamination styles are a performance enhancer as much as they are like an aesthetic or a tie to history or something like that. So it's not offered here, but I could understand why you would want it. If you want something really pretty, if you chose the Damascus steel, then maybe you want Sanmai. Those were techniques that were used historically speaking. Incidentally, between the two, Kobusei is probably the more commonly used today in Japanese style sword crafting, at least in Japan. It was probably used more commonly historically, but both of these things could have been used historically. So do bear in mind they're both valid historical techniques, and either one would be good, but the Sanmai is more likely to show. So you'll be able to see a line running on the surface of the steel around the edge, and it can be very visually pleasing to some. Kobusei, you're a little less able to visually see. Either one can be very nice, though. I'm going to choose Maru, though, because that's the only option. Now we have the types of blade. Now this says blade shape Zukuri. There's curved blades and straight blades. I'm going to choose myself Shinogi Zukuri, and I think they do a solid job of the cross-section here, though this could be maybe zazzed up a little bit. Shinogi Zukuri at a cross-section, that means if you cut the blade in half and kind of looked at it head on, this is the silhouette that you would see. This is the profile. So this is what I'm going to choose because it's what I'm used to training with. It's a sword type that I think is, at least I'm trying to use this for training, and this is what I'm used to training with. So this is kind of the no-brainer for me. It's also a very common shape. It doesn't cost any extra money, so I think that's a solid choice. It's probably the shape that you think of when you think of Japanese-style swords. Now, Shobu Zukuri, it shows this diamond shape, which I don't think it's that shape all the way around. This probably is a lot more similar to a Shinogi Zukuri blade until you get up towards the tip here, where this, you can see the line, the edge is reinforced all the way up to the tip. I heard that these were for fighting the Mongols. They wore leather armor, and that Shobu Zukuri was developed as a way of penetrating that, but I've been told that that is hearsay and not necessarily historical fact. So I can tell you that Shobu Zukuri tips do tend to break less, and they do tend to puncture better. At the same time, some people don't like training with them. If you're doing Iaido or something like that, it's possible you might not enjoy it as much. At the same time, if you thrust a lot, you might like it a little bit more. So that's the style of tip, and this is accurately shown. But it's cross-sectionally probably going to look a little bit more like a Shinogi Zukuri blade until it gets to the tip, where it has more of this diamond cross-section, and ideally is reinforced all the way up to the very tippy tip. Hira Zukuri. These are more common in tanto, like knives and short swords in Japan, the wakizashi and the tanto. It did happen in katana, but it was not as common. They are a single bevel, I messed my words up here. They're a single bevel, one wedge shape. That's what I was trying to say. And they can be ridiculously good cutters and quite light. So they're really fun swords to use, especially if you're doing like a lot of water bottle or pool noodle cutting. They can be very fast and very, very effective cutters. They can slice tatami very well as well. They're no slouch there. They do tend to be a little bit more on the fragile side, especially if you're picking one with no niku, no additional edge bevel. It's going to be a laser beam, but potentially a bit on the fragile side. Now, it doesn't have to be. I did test a Shadow Dancer Hira Zukuri blade some time ago, where I cut some aggressive things with it, and it was made of S5 and in the Hira Zukuri shape, and it was very light, and I swung it very hard, and it did not get damaged. So it's not exactly fragile depending on the type of steel that you have it in. However, it can be. So bear that in mind. It can also be very light, and it cuts very effectively. The Nagamaki Zukuri. Now, these typically come with these bohi in it. So you see this small one riding along the kind of midsection here. That's called the sohi. And then this larger one on the spine area, that fuller, is called a bohi. And the base of the cross section looks a little bit like this. So if you were to cut this section in half here, it would look like this first diagram. Towards the tip, it would look like this. Sometimes they also flare out a little bit, and the tip spine area widens out a little. So this would actually kind of be what it looks like in the midsection, and then it would flare out and look a little bit more like a Shinogi Zukuri tip. So those are one. And then Kuraha Zukuri. This is a really old style. It's typically not what people order in katana, but it's a very, very old style of sword. It's got one big giant bevel. They're not always the greatest cutter, but they can feel really really good in the hand, like a stick. They can be quite light. It's also a very old style of sword. So if you're looking for something that's like, a very old style of sword, then this is one. They come with two tips. There's this chisel style tip, and then there's a more rounded iteration. And then there is Moto-haba. So I don't know why this is, straight and double edged. I was going to say these are often curved, but Moto-haba refers primarily to this tip. I believe these kinds of swords can be offered with or without the Bohi. So there's a sohi that runs up to the tip area here, and then this top half or top third of the blade is double edged. Now I've seen some Shadow Dancer Moro Hazakuri blades that don't have the reverse edge sharpened. You'll want to maybe confirm that with the folks at Swordis before ordering it, which way you prefer it. But generally, if you get a differentially hardened blade, that differential hardening wraps all the way around to the back here, and this back edge would be sharpened. And the tip typically has been sharpened on the Shadow Dancer Moro Hazakuri blade that I've seen before. So anyway, that's also an interesting style. Do bear in mind that these two bottom styles are going to be kind of weird to train with. Conceivably, any of the top curved variety you would be able to bring into a dojo and train with. The nagamaki can feel a little thin and weird on the back of your hand, but it's not so bad. Some people really like it. Shobu, the tip can also drag on the meat of your hand a little bit. Some people don't like training with those. The tips can be very, very sharp and very acute and kind of scratchy. Shinogi Zakuri and Hirazakuri are pretty easy to train with. Moto-haba, though, if the back edge or tip is sharpened, traditional ways of doing EI will have your hand bleeding pretty quickly. And these straight Kira Hazakuri blades, also not usually what most modern styles train with. So do coordinate with your teacher, your instructor, if there's anything that's required. But I'm going to choose Shinogi Zakuri. We've talked about why I'm picking what I'm picking, but hopefully it makes sense, and hopefully some of the explanation there has helped. Next, we're going to choose Bohi. This is the fullering. So you have Naginata Bohi with Sohi. So this is the Naginata Hi is this bottom fuller part here, and the Sohi is the little top one. And then no Bohi, simple enough. It's not there at all. A Bohi is probably one wide bevel, or one wide channel cut into the blade that goes up through the tip area here a bit. I always say this name wrong, but it's like double Bohi. So these are two smaller grooves, two smaller channels that are cut, and they run parallel with each other up to the tip area. Bohi with Sohi, so this is one wide big channel, and then a smaller one that runs after the Shinogi-ji, or the like on the bevel of the blade. So this small line is after the initial bevel has begun. And then Naginata Hi. So this is just the Naginata Hi without the Sohi running up against it. Naginata Hi terminate in this way, and they also usually are on blades shaped like Naginata that kind of taper back at the spine. So these are the different styles of fuller and groove and Bohi. Why would you choose them? Well, the Naginata Hi and Sohi can look great. They're just very beautiful and striking looking blades. The Bohis can just accent, catch light, and be very, very beautiful looking things. They can accentuate details in the sword. They can be very pretty. They serve potentially a functional purpose. Supposedly, sometimes they can be stronger, sometimes weaker. I don't notice a huge difference when I break them. One breaks quicker than the other. No-hi is cheaper though, so that's what I'm going to choose. The arguable point here, and something I may regret, is having a Bohi is really helpful for Hasuji, the wind sound, the tachikaze, maybe that's the word. Anyway, when you make a swishy sound by swishing the sword in the air, Bohi are louder. It grabs the air and it's more audible and it's easier to hear. So since I want this to be a training tool, a Bohi would probably be a smart idea, but I'm going to save $50 here because it's not required, and do that. But it's a savings. I might regret that. The point, do I want a Yokote or not? It's no extra amount of money. A Yokote is this line right here, and often there's a line and then there's something done to make the tip more opaque or change in appearance slightly, and it makes the tip more visible and imposing looking to my eye. So some polishes look really good without, like a Shobu Zakuri would not have a Yokote on it. Hirazakuri would not have a Yokote on it. But the style of blade that I had can have one, and I generally liked it. So I'm going to select yes to a Yokote. You can always not have one, but sometimes you can't have one based on the style. So Shobuzakure typically does, and Hirozakure doesn't. Those are the ones that come to mind anyway, as not having a Yukote. Temper line. So this is, I like that they're grayed out. So below here, this is the differential hardening versus through hardening. And now bear in mind that through hardened blades are going to take a lot more punishment in terms of like not bending and springing back into shape and being hit on metal poles and not breaking in half. That kind of resilience is going to do better in a through hardened blade, and that's really the only options we have. If I chose a different kind of steel, then I could have chosen one of these real hamones, and it would then be a differentially hardened blade. Differentially hardened blades are better at edge retention, so if you're good at cutting and you have good alignment and you're capable of swinging, or you're cutting really hard things in a predictable way, then you're more likely to have your edge last longer with a differentially hardened blade. For example, if I were to set the katana on a copper pipe and then baton it consistently in, a differentially hardened blade would last longer, probably show no edge damage to doing some of that, where a through hardened blade may well show some damage from being batoned into a metal pipe, like a copper pipe, even soft metal. However, if I take a differentially hardened blade and slap a tree with it, or somebody's coming at you with a pole arm and you bat it out of the way, it's very possible you will bend your sword by doing that. With a through hardened blade, you can slap a pole arm out of the way, you can slap a tree, you can do all sorts of things, and it will spring back into shape and won't take a bend, and also will cut and hold an edge quite well on softer targets, but when you go to really hard targets, it'll lose its edge more quickly. Anyway, this is about the temper line, but it also seems to be a little bit about the type of hardness, because I can't choose these because I don't have a differentially hardened blade. Anyway, know that that's a big difference, and one thing that will really have an impact on how durable your sword is and how you use your sword. So I'm going to choose none because I don't want to spend an extra $50, and I don't really like etched hamones. Etched just means that it's basically colored on. There's some acid that's been applied to the blade or sanding, and it's should just be acid because it's saying etched. Something is done to discolor the blade and give the impression that it's something it's not, which is differentially hardened. And so it might have a cool look on the blade, but I don't think I really want it. I'd rather just have nothing on there than pay $50 for something that is not real. It's not like I wouldn't mind etching something else in there, like a cool design, but pretending to be a hamone is where the reason I don't like it, not because of the artistic etching kind of thing on there. Anyway, no hamone, it saves me a little money. It's a concession I can make. Now, polishing. This is $0. I don't know that these photos necessarily are going to do a great job, at least as I'm seeing them. So, what I see here are some tool marks. It looks like a kind of more or less a satiny kind of polish would be the normal polish. It's not a mirror polish, and that's what the next one is. So here I can clearly see the reflection of things in the mirror, or the polish of the blade, but I also make out some scuffs and scratches and things like that. Then there's optimized mirror polishing, and this reads, because this is not like an official polish, the process is longer with a higher attention to detail. It makes the katana's blade shinier and more reflective than regular mirror polishing. This is what I'm going to pick. I kind of want to see the optimized mirror polishing and see how close to a mirror it happens to get. Conceivably, this does not make a huge difference in performance. There's not really much of a difference that is going to be had between a slight sandy, a slightly rough texture to a mirror texture, but it could be a little bit different. Supposedly if you oil up your sword and cut a tatami mat, it slides through a little better. I'm going to hope that the mirror polishing is a little better. This is something I'm kind of getting just to see how it looks myself. I would probably, on a budget, choose the normal polishing, but because I'm not sure how this looks, I'm actually kind of curious about it, and that's why I'm choosing it. It's an outlier in that way. I would probably choose normal polishing or maybe mirror polishing, but optimized mirror polishing is what we're going to give a go to. Mei is the signature on the tang. If you want it signed with something, then it looks like it would be a little extra money. If you don't, then that's what we're going to choose. I'd like them to sign it Swordis, but at the same time, it's going to cost more money, and I'm trying to keep it on a budget here. Tsuka length is another one. This has to do with the length of the handle, the grip. It's measured from the top of the fuchi to the bottom of the kashura, It's basically the whole grip section of the blade. And I don't see a lot of options here. There are going to be some people that prefer like 13, 14, 15-inch handles. I'm generally preferring a 10, but this is a longer blade. I might want just a little extra because I tend to like 10.5. So I'm going to lean into an 11-inch handle, and we'll pay the extra $20 there. 10 would probably be okay. So far, the optimized mirror polishing and the extra $20 on the handle, that's $70 that I could dubiously do without. The others I'm confident in getting. Now, Tsuka shape. This is the visuals here do a really good job at showing what shape is the handle. Is it wasted at all? So Hayachi, I think is how you pronounce it, has slight wasting on the part where your fingers go, your knuckles. And then the Riko is an hourglass shape. And then Imogata, I'm probably saying it wrong, is more or less without any wasting or profiling. Now, I'm going to choose the Hachi side. I like to have a little wasting. I honestly, either one of these can be okay. The Riko shape can look very nice, but it's tough to execute sometimes. Hachi, I think, gives folks a little bit more grace to make the things line up. So I think I prefer the Riko, but Hachi tends to be executed a little better. So I'm gonna choose that. Also, the Riko shape can be good. I don't find any one of them, honestly, to be problematic. I train with, I think both the Moto-haba I have, one is just straight like this. The other has a Riko or wasted shape. I do notice that the wasted shape sometimes makes my left hand, the kashra, the pommel, kind of move in a way or attack the flub of my hand sometimes. It's a nuance that's small, but honestly, any one of these can be just fine. I'm sure you're going to be confident in holding, or they're going to be comfortable in the hand. And once you get them, you probably won't think about them. I think about it more as like an aesthetic thing, but if you have some preference over how they control, then, well, I guess let me know in the comments, because I'd be curious. I don't notice a whole lot of difference when I actually cut with them or move them around. Once I have it in hand, I don't notice this nuance of the handle. It tends to be maybe how I index it a little bit, but more in just the way it looks on the shelf. So I'm gonna pick the Hachi or Hayachi. Anyway, wrapping material, the Ito. This is the substance, the outer coating of a textile that is on the handle. So it's what the handle is wrapped in that you're used to seeing. This can be silk, it can be leather, it can be cotton, it can be old lamp cord. But the choices we have here are rayon, silk. Rayon tends to be like an imitation silk, and then leather. Yeah, I'm gonna probably go with the silk, but in looking here, what I see from a leather perspective, I would probably advise, if you do leather, to spend the extra money. The leather that comes out of reproduction forges tends to be a little rough. This looks glossy and nice, but leather is a tough one to work with. It looks really nice, but it doesn't always hold up as long as silk does. I'm gonna go with black silk because in my mind, I'm looking for some black on black with some blacky black for this theme, this sword. I've made a lot of custom projects like that. It's a theme that I like. I want something visually that has bling when I look at it close, but in the dojo doesn't stand out and isn't gonna, like make somebody look like they're wearing clown shoes or something. So I'm gonna go with black silk versus rayon. Rayon is also okay. It's a little less money, but this is $80 more, and this is the connection between you and the blade, and rayon can feel a little slick. I don't know that it really matters, but I'm gonna choose silk. This is still a mid-tier sword. I'd at least like to have some silk on the sword. The $80 here, though, it's worth noting that this is a concession I could make. If I wanted to save a little money, I could go with the lower end material, but it's also an important one. It's where you're coming in contact with the sword. That's an important thing, and I think they do a good job with silk. So wrapping style, this is portrayed well by the visual here. Hanari-maki has the diamonds that run all the way down. Katate-maki has this section that's flat here, and the Minuki tend to go in this section that's flat here. On the Hanari-maki, the Minuki are buried under the knots. So this shows the Minuki prominently, and then there's also none under where your hands generally go in the sword. I'm going to choose this. There's not really a preference. I can't say that I mind either one. Sometimes my hands get caught on Minuki when I choose this option, so it's something to, it's a potential hazard. At the same time, I don't get a lot of swords like that. So it'd just be fun to see it done well on a nice sword and practice with it. So here's to hoping it goes well. Now, paper wedges, hishigami, these are little paper triangle folded things that get stuck and nested between the folds, basically, of to bolster the material, the ito. And it gets stuck in the folds and it bolsters the material. And it was used traditionally, and it's hard to do, and it's a pain in the butt, and it makes the ito tighter, or at least it seems to. So the Hishigami Pro is one thing that Shadow Dancer has offered for a while. I think it's one of the best options that you can buy in a sword. The swords that I've had from Shadow Dancer in the past that have had this Hishigami Pro have had tight ito and have been good swords to use. So this is something I absolutely would recommend and want to get on this sword. Ray skin, this is the substance under the ito. So the ito is this black leather. In this case, the ray skin is the, or samegawa is this white part underneath. And in this photo, it's black, and in this, it's red. Now, those are the three colors you get to choose from. I'm going to choose black, but there's obviously an aesthetic component here. But later, you're going to see that I get to pick the quality of the samegawa that's in there. And what black does is it basically hides a lot of the texture on the samegawa. So that means that if I were to get white and I wanted a really nice skin, the white would help accentuate. People could see it. I could see the quality of the skin between the knots in the ito, right? Where the samegawa shows, I would see that quality. But black lacquered ito hides a lot of that. So you can get a kind of mediocre skin and also save a little money because it still looks nice. And with my black on black with some blacky black theme, I think it's going to be okay. Red hides things well as well, but to me it looks a little, I don't know, it looks a little mall ninja. Anyway, the ray skin wrap. So ray skin is the samegawa. The wrap style here, you can see that this nodule, the white knobby substance here is called samegawa. Bear in mind that this is not tanned, so it has like a really coarse horsehide, thick feel to it. And it's rested, it's cut, and then put in a channel, and then it's wrapped in ito. Now, this is a traditional way of doing it. So is fully wrapping it. Fully wrapping it means that rawhide is wrapped all the way around the handle, and it is also a traditional way of doing it. Supposedly, samegawa was an expensive substance, and people would be loath to use lots of it when they didn't have to, and putting it in the channel would look like a nice sword, but then, save a little bit of money. Wrapping it fully offers, in theory, well, not in theory, I think in practice as well, it keeps everything together a little bit more. So you have two slats of wood, two scales that are put on the side of the tang of the blade, and then the whole thing is wrapped in this really coarse rawhide stuff. And when it dries out, it doesn't move. So it kind of acts as like a thing holding the wooden scales together beyond just the rice glue. So that adds like an additional layer of the handle not coming apart on top of the ito. And the channeled one doesn't have that additional structural integrity. So I think the fully wrapped ones are more resilient. If I was going to go and beat stuff into the ground, this would be a necessary $50. I generally recommend it, though I have heard recently that the way these are wrapped, not everyone does them particularly well, and sometimes the handles are misshaped and things don't come out well when you choose this option. That hasn't been my experience, but I will acknowledge that is somebody with experience has provided that feedback. So in this particular case, I'm going to choose the panels because it saves $50. The goal here for new students will be cutting bottles, tatami mats, probably tatami mats too, predominantly, and to use free ito. So I don't need the structural integrity, so to speak. This is going to be a concession that I'm willing to make, though I would like it. That would be something that I would personally recommend, especially if you foresee any potential hard use. It gives some extra reassurance that the handle isn't going to break. Not that they do, but anyway, I like it. All right, so the next one is Emperor Nodes in the ray skin. This is what I alluded to earlier when I was picking the color. If I pick none, then there's no Emperor Nodes. So this looks pretty uniform and the nodules are small. This is a good example of a very mediocre skin. When we go to normal, it costs $100 more, but I got these big bulbous nodules, and you can see how all the nodules are just a sizier. They're bigger and they look nicer. And then a large is going to have even larger nodules here, and the whole quality of the skin is probably going to be better. So this is something that is nice. Historically, also a thing that happened, and the quality of the skin is something you might want to show off. If you do, white is nice. There's a lot of different ways to show it off that you can maybe ask the folks at Swordis about, but I'm going to choose normal, and I chose black lacquer already, and this is just to save some money and still look really good. I think those black lacquer to normal, if you're going to lacquer it, don't bother spending a whole bunch of extra money because it really hides all those details you're paying for. It'd be like buying a really Sanmai laminated, beautiful, folded blade and then doing a mirror polish on it and wiping all that stuff away and not being able to see any of it. Next, we have the Handguard, the tsuba, and this is the options that we have. Now, there's a lot of different options here. Some are really familiar, and I've seen this Mitsudome fitting on other swords. I don't know if any of these are really bespoke to Zisei or Shadow Dancer, but some of them I certainly don't see very often. Like this Mitsudome fitting, I don't see very often outside of Shadow Dancer or Zisei. A lot of these actually I don't really see very often outside of them. So they're a little different, but I don't think they're necessarily bespoke. There is actually a slight difference here. What I'm not seeing is the Mitsudome fitting that matches the Fuchikashira I saw earlier. So I'm gonna pick this Mitsudome tsuba here, but I'm gonna be sure that I'm gonna ping Shadow Dancer, and I'm gonna probably pick a different tsuba that isn't on here, and hopefully I can get them to add the one that I want, that I'm pretty sure they have. So anyway, but there's a Mitsudome. Now, handle ornament Minuki. Minuki are small, each available, black, silver, okay. All the different variations. Okay, well, so there's a bunch of different variations and some slight different colors. So you have black, brass, antique brass, and then copper nickel. Anyway, I'm gonna just go with the black brass swirly Mitsudome Minuki that I see here. Perfect. Don't even need to look any further. They do look like there's some different and decent options actually, but Minuki right here, 04, black brass, bee's knees. That's where we want to go. It looks like the silver fittings might be nicer. I'm going to go with these because they're a little less expensive. $30, still have swirly Mitsudomes. Okay, now we've got the Fuchikashira, and there's a few different options here, but obviously I'm going to pick swirly Mitsudome. So we've got this one right here, but it does look like they have antique brass, and there may be a coupe or nickel variety. It looks like black brass, antique brass. Maybe they have another option of it. Maybe they don't. Anyway, I see swirly Mitsudomes here, so we are good. The habaki is the blade collar. It does a few different things, and it's honestly something a lot of people don't pay a whole lot of attention to, but it's a blade collar, the washer that sits and rests at the bottom of your blade, and it provides the tension for your scabbard so that the blade holds in there correctly. It acts as a shock absorber. It does some things, but that's not what this video is necessarily about. I will tell you, I'm looking for a black on black with some blacky black, maybe some silver in there. So I'm going to choose this one because I care about the habaki, and it is an irritation to me to see all of the habaki that I always see. So this would be the logical option, but just because I'm me, I'm gonna pick the most expensive thing that does nothing here. I don't think from a performance standpoint there's any difference between these things. I just see the brass habaki all the time. If you aren't irritated by seeing the same thing all the time, then and you don't have hundreds of swords, then this is probably a perfectly sufficient option. And frankly, even a well done brass habaki is still kind of a chef's kiss. But I will say that the other options here all add just a touch of class. Brass, I believe, is a little stronger than some of the copper variety here. Not in necessarily a super meaningful way, but I have had some under arduous use copper habaki break, and I haven't had that problem really with brass habaki. So they do seem to be a little bit more durable. This silver colored stuff, I don't think it's silver necessarily, but whatever this happens to be is just fitting the theme of the sword that I'm looking for more. And I like seeing something different. So I'm gonna go with this. This is my second frivolous, nonsensical thing to do. And I'm met with some extra here. So if I want Sepa, these are the things that go on either end of the guard, the tsuba, and they're between on either end of the tsuba, and the tsuba and Sepa, then so sorry, fuchi, then Sepa, then tsuba, then Sepa, then habaki, all those words, right? So they basically go on either side of the cross guard, and they're a little washer that you won't see if you don't ever take your sword apart. But you will see slight accenting on the sword when you draw the sword. This will show quite prevalently underneath the habaki area, the fitting that we just chose. And I like everything to look pretty uniform. Some people like mixing them up, and like silver and gold and stuff like that mixed together. I don't mind it when I see it and other people choose it for me, but I seldom choose that myself. So it's going to cost me an extra $10 to get the silver colored Sepa. Now the scabbard, the saya. So we have simple lacquered options, and I've seen a number of these from Shadow Dancer. They're good. The base option here. Now I see $40, but I don't see a no option. So I don't know why you wouldn't want a saya. You definitely do, but there isn't a no option. There's only a $40 option. So if I go over some of these, this kind of stone surface on here, this kind of texture is like a satin color and doesn't show fingerprints particularly well. So that's good. If you get the black variety of it, then if you bang it on something like this, you can kind of touch it up with a Sharpie. You'll notice it up close, but it hides it pretty well in the dojo. Some of these gloss ones here have cool textures on them. They show fingerprints quite well, so you got to wipe them down, but they can be very, very cool looking in this splatter pattern. It looks like it has like gold on some of the layers too, which is pretty neat. These crack pattern ones, people like. I've seen so many of them, I don't tend to like it. The cracking does have a little bit of a texture to it, but not a lot. And I haven't ever had any of these blue splatter ones or this leprechaun-y green one over here. But anyway, those are the base models, the urushi lamination, urushi imitation urushi. Okay, so this is just a different style of stuff. They look like higher end pieces. So gloss, again, it's going to show some fingerprints. There's some with splattery patterns here. As I move down, here are some options with samegawa. Now, this is the coarser, nodule-y stuff, and more or less the thing here is that this substance is hard to cut through. So sometimes you're drawing, if you're trying to do a quick draw on a katana, sometimes people cut through this part of the sword. They draw and try to move it too quickly, and the blade is very sharp. It cuts through the scabbard and into your hand, because that's usually what is pulling the scabbard apart. So the samegawa acts as a little bit of an additional barrier to do that. It'd be unlikely that you would pull it so strong that you would cut through the scabbard as well as the samegawa and the lacquer holding it all together. So it acts as like a little extra safety, which I think is cool, and I would say is worth, for like a new student in particular, as a safety feature, kind of a worthy thing to consider. I also think it looks really handsome. But there are some more handsome things down here that I'm going to have to choose. So here's a ribbed scabbard. I've seen this. It has a nice texture to it. I've seen that from Shadow Dancer. That looks nice. I haven't seen this in person, but that looks kind of cool. This is not pot leaves. These are like falling maple leaves. They look cut out. This is a pretty nice scabbard for the $80 extra. This one, I'm not sure if it'd be nice to see the whole scabbard instead of just one part of it. But this, I think, is the winner chicken dinner here. There's bands of what look like abalone or mother of pearl, or let's just call it glitter for lack of a better word. And this is going to be the choice. It's a little bit of extra, but and no extra safety, but I want to train with it too, and it looks really cool. All right, so now we're on to the sageo. This is, I'm going to choose the blue, just to give a little bit of color, but this is the basic one. It looks like it's included, and then there's Japanese rayon. And if I look at the Japanese rayon, I've had this sageo before. It's much more rigid than the other. It's a nicer sageo. I don't really have any complaints about it. It feels like a denser, nicer, tighter thing. And if you wanted to actually use the sageo for anything other than tying to your belt, if you were handcuffing someone, it would probably be a more resilient material to use. But I'm going to keep things cheap. The sageo for me more or less just gets untied and then secured to my obi or my belt or my hakama or whatever I happen to be doing with it, and that's the only thing it does. And other than that, it's just in the way. So I don't need it, and so I'm gonna do the cheap option. The nicer ones though they're nicer, but I'm just trying. That's a concession I guess I'm willing to make, because I don't do anything else with the Sagio. And if I want to spend money, then I might go buy or have a custom one made, or something like that isn't offered on the site. A tip for the site as well might be to offer Sageo lengths, or different options for lengths of Sageo if on request, because sometimes the ones provided are too short, or sometimes they're too long. So just a thought. Now, incidentally, here on upgrades, we have buffalo horn parts. I am not going to choose this, but I'd be tempted to. Buffalo horn parts are on the scabbard, and that means that your kurigata, koijiri, and koiguchi are going to be made of horn, and it's nice that they offered this just separately. I'd be very tempted to do it, but I'm going to save some money. Tsuka custom fit, so, and then scabbard custom fit. So I'm guessing that what they're doing is they're taking pre-made scabbards or scabbards generally made to a template and painting them, and that's what you're getting. And if you wanted to have a person that took the sword that they made for you and had a scabbard and handle exclusively made to that, then this is what you would choose, and it would cost you an extra $500 or so for the privilege. I do think that if you're looking for a custom sword, though, that is a worthy consideration if you are a practitioner and this is what you're gonna use. These can make a very big difference in how the sword feels and how well it moves, and just how connected you are to it. It's a lot of money, but it does make it feel that much more nipped and tucked, and it certainly, I imagine, takes a lot of time, which is why the additional cost and delay. The Bohi polish is another one, so if I didn't get a Bohi, so I'm not going to worry about this one. I can select it though, which is kind of funny. They've grayed out everything else, but I don't have a sword with a Bohi, so I don't know why I can select this. But if I did, then they're gonna, as they know, put mirror polishing in the Bohi and do the transitions and zhuzh it up a little bit. If you're buying Bohi because you like the way they look, this is a worthy addition to that, because they're gonna make sure they look really good. And so I would say it's worth it. All right, well, I've got everything. That is all of the options, and more or less at this point you can see my order. And so we're gonna evaluate the sword when it arrives. And hopefully going through this has given you some idea about why I chose what I did. I think the options that I have are gonna do what I set out to do. I've got something that is gonna look pretty cool. I've got something that is going to be durable for students. I've got something that is long enough to be my size, or for other people my size that are training in new students. Yeah, so I've got something, and there's some swirly mitsudomes on there, and I've chosen something that is going to be tight Ito, good for use. At the same time, I didn't go all the way over. I did make some frivolous choices here for additions. The habaki, the more ornate polish and stuff there. You could roll this down a little bit and still get a very good sword. But I also didn't go overboard. I didn't pick the custom options for handle and scabbard. I would like to, and I may well regret not choosing a full wrap Samigawa handle or a Bohi. But as it is, at the moment we have $1,168. That is what I'm ordering, and we will evaluate the sword when it arrives. All right, sword friends, the sword is here, and I'm going to tell you about its bits and bobs and fits and features. So I'm going to start with a Kashra, the end cap here, and I really like these fittings. I really like them, and I think I actually had some made just like them some time ago. So I had a commissioned set of fittings from Roman Urban made, and they had this Mitsudome fitting with this Nanako pattern on the outside. So I can say I really like them because I had a custom set made very similar to them some time ago. Incidentally, that set of fittings went on a sword I called Black Beauty, and this is also black on black with some blacky black and shares some similarities. So I'm kind of tickled by that. Anyway, I like the fitting, and I like the way it's done. The Nanako pattern on the rim has a texture to it that grabs my hand a little bit. Now, it's not uncomfortable, but it's not sharp either, but it's very accurate and feels like little scales on there. It's nice. All right, so the other bits though around the Fuchi, I like the fitting. It came out actually crisper and cleaner than the photos alluded to. This actually looks better than it did in the pictures on the website, which is good. Under promise and over deliver. It's got nice silver shitodome in it. That's this little spacer or the washer area that goes between the Ito and the fitting here. And I like that they're silver because I chose other silver components. It drives me a little crazy when I get silver fittings, and then the shitodome are copper or something like that, and it pulls the vibe out. Now, I didn't get to choose these, but I'm glad that they're silver, so I'll take that for what it's worth. Transitions are fantastic. They've lined them up very, very well. This is often bunchy and clumsily done. This is fantastic looking. It's one of the better tied handles that I have seen out of even Shadow Dancer. It's very good. The knots stand a little bit proud, but they're not bad. And the silk feels good. I don't know if I got the silk or the rayon. I'll have to confirm with which one it is, but whatever it is exceptionally tight. It feels very tight. I can push on it and it's not moving. I mean, there's just a little bit of give, but I'm not displacing the knots. I can't move these kind of triangles around. So the Ito is very tight. The Hishigami Pro that I paid for is doing exactly what I wanted it to do and giving a really tight sense of Ito, something I'm sure is going to last a number of years. I'm also not regretting the black lacquered underneath. It doesn't look like the skin is a bad one, though. I don't see an emperor node, but I do see larger nodules than I was expecting, and the black lacquer, I think, meshes well. There's also Manuki here. They share a similar feedback to the Kashra up here in that they are really nice. They have a good texture to them. They're more detailed than I thought they would be. I can move them ever so slightly here, which is, I guess, not uncommon for this style of wrap, but wouldn't mind if they were tacked in a little bit more. Didn't move as much as they do, though my hands aren't going to come in contact with them, so I'm not too worried about it. Moving up, the shape is good. I don't necessarily make out the hachi shape so much. It has a slight taper to it, but it's very faint. It is very comfortable though, so no complaints on the shaping. Fuchi transition, excellent. It's a really well wrapped handle. This is very, very good. No, like, it doesn't compel me to want to get a custom handle wrap on it, which is much more money. Not that that wouldn't be a step up, but this is really, really solid work. And then you might notice the tsuba, a little different than anything that was on the website there. I'd encourage Swordis to list this option. It's got swirly mitsudomes on it. It is so cool, and I'm very happy to have it on this one. Moving from there, we have the habaki, and it is glorious. It's actually really much nicer looking than I thought it would be. The scratch pattern isn't as kind of janky as the photos look. This is a very clean and well done habaki. I'm kind of I'm happy with it. I spent a little extra frivolous money on the habaki, and the fact that I look at it and it makes me smile is a pleasant one. It just dawned on me looking at the tsuba that this has like a domed texture to it. So it's thicker in the center and tapers down. That's a traditional way a lot of these tsuba were made. A delightful addition to see on the tsuba here. From there, I'm going to talk about the scabbard. Now, this has really intense glitter in it. Now, I think it's abalone or mother of pearl or something, but it looks like glitter. And the patterns online were a little bit more subtle. This is put on a little heavy-handed. At the same time, it gives it a really intense and clear look. It's not as subtle looking up close, but at the same time, I can't say I mind it. It catches the light really well and has a lot of presence. I wouldn't have minded it being a little more subtle though. I don't mind it though. I don't mind it. And the way they're applied, generally speaking, as I'm looking around it, is pretty clean. The lines that are supposed to be straight appear to all be really quite straight and well done. So scabbard is good. Now, it doesn't have the taper that I conventionally see in swords from Shadow Dancer though. So it's a little thicker. It doesn't have the same refinement, but that could be because it's a longer one with a complex paint job, and so they forego the thinning it out. I also noticed that it has horn fittings on it and silver shitodome as well here, silver washers in there. Again, thank you, whoever put this together. Saw I was going for silver and kept it that way, even though I didn't get to choose those fittings. Because I know they make them in the cheaper brass looking color, and that's not what's on here. So that's fantastic. But I see horn fittings on here. I didn't pay the extra for them, so maybe the scabbard just comes with them. If that's the case, then I guess be aware to save yourself the upgrade. But I see horn fittings on this particular scabbard, or maybe the scabbard was already made, and so they just kept horn fittings on here. The koiguchi is really well done. Again, it looks like horn. Maybe it's not. The kurigata looks like horn, but this also does a bit. The mouth is very clean though, very, very good looking, and it also is tensioned correctly. So little tension, doesn't fall out, gentle push, comes right out. It also came shipped with this little habaki saver. So this little foam insert was wrapped around here, and it just keeps the habaki from being pushed on all the way and makes it safer for shipping. And it's also safer for you to store it. So it's a nice little addition that it came with. The other thing to note about the scabbard is it draws and sheaths well, so far as I can tell right now. So I don't anticipate any problems, but it feels like it glides in and out actually really quite well. The blade shape is, for a blade that is this size, on the kind of thinner side. If I could, I would specify making it a little thicker. If I could specify the dimensions other than how long it is, I might have made it a little fatter in spots. But as it is, it feels really, really comfortable in the hand, surprisingly so. I don't mind it. And the mirror polish is mirrory. But if I look really close, I can make out what look like very subtle tool marks. They are subtle, but they're in there. And since I paid an extra $100 for an optimized mirror polishing, to me that kind of means no tool marks. But well, I got this to see what it looks like. To me, this doesn't look like it. If that's what you were expecting, you would be disappointed. And so I that could be my fault there. But I do see they're very faint, but I am a sword reviewer on the internet. There's no like harsh tool markings in the light or anything. These are very faint scratches, I think, from probably whatever they were using to hone the blade, which feels exceptionally sharp. Anyway, it does have some minor scuffing. Anyway, apart from that, it is a Shinogi Zakuri blade. It does have a mirror polish. That means there's no artifacts or character in the surface of the steel that I'm really able to show. It's a pretty simple looking thing. So it's time for me to go out and swing it around. And swinging it around, I can tell you it moves fantastically. It's my size. It encourages the technique the way I wanted it to. It's very sharp, so I'm going very slowly to make sure that I'm doing that technique while simultaneously not cutting myself apart. And it draws and sheaths. It glides all like it's on rails. The scabbard feels really, really good. It's not loud. It's not raspy. The only thing that it isn't as well is it's also not noisy. I can't hear the blade really well. If I swing it really hard, like it's making a swishy sound, but I don't hear it. And now I'm not particularly great with hearing in general, so that's not a huge surprise, but something that I probably will regret here is not putting a Bohi on it. If I could, I would have put a Bohi on it. And one thing I might suggest to Swordis is to put the option for like a reinforced Kasaki. Those Kasaki that swell out a little bit just before the tip tend to be a little bit louder. It's like a whistle tip, and it makes a sword that's very loud, very easy to hear, and very easy to train with to see if you're doing the technique correctly. Because sign of good alignment is that wind sound. If you're not getting it, it means your blade is probably a little off kilter. I can't hear it if I'm doing it right or wrong in this case. So anyway, that's something for regrets. In terms of using it, it cuts just fine. Now, I didn't cut a lot of stuff here. I cut some bottles and some stuff that I had about just to show it came with an exceptional edge, and it didn't dull or ding or nothing happened. I gave it a couple swacks on the stand. It sprung back into shape. And to me, this means if it cuts through the neck of water bottles and it can take bad whacks on the stand, it's going to be fine to hand to new students. They're not going to be able to really do too much with this that's going to harm it. So it's a good thing that I can let anyone else do some cutting with as well and not have to worry about it coming apart. All right, sword friends, you have seen all the choices I made, heard the context as to why I made those choices, heard me babble on about all the other choices, and hopefully that was helpful. You also got to see me use this sword for Iaido and cutting. You got to see close-ups of the sword, and I'm really curious, do you think that they met expectations? Do you think the sword, if you made the same choice as I was the sword that came out the other end? I'd like your feedback on it if you have time to drop a comment. Would you have made different choices, or are there things you're curious about? If you throw them down there, I will try to answer as well. Anyway, that is what I can share with you. Hopefully you know if it's worth your money or not. Hopefully if you were going to spend money on it, you know a little bit more about what to get. It is time I answer the question, though, do I personally think it's worth it? The short answer to that is yes, I do think it's worth it. This is an excellent sword. It is a great training tool. It's well made, and it has a ton of options that are meaningful, and it's just really well done. A lot of things are nipped and tucked on here that are often missed, and this feels like it's going to be a reliable training tool for a number of years that's going to meet all the things that I set out to have met. At the same time, it's a lot of money. $1,168 is a whole lot of money, and I could order a custom sword from somebody else for $500 that might have as many or similar features. So what do I get that's special here? Well, one, the fitting set with bedazzled Mitsudomes that's really well done. That's kind of a new one. That was special and obviously tickled me. I don't know about $500. Well, actually, yes, tickled me for over $500. I'm a sucker for them. But it's well shaped. It came sharp. It came ready to go. There was no messing around. I just pulled it out of the box and it's ready to do EI. It's ready to do Tamashigiri. It's a great product, and it feels like it's going to hold up for a long time. There were some things that I think could be better done. At the same time, there are ways you can do them better for more money. In retrospect, I might add a Bohi. I might ask for a reinforced Kisaki, and I'd probably skip the mirror polishing, and I might do the custom scabbard for a little bit more. Those would be the things I'd lean on. Anyway, yes, I still think it's worth it. I think you're paying a little bit more for it, but I will say out of the box, this is what I ordered. It meets or exceeds my expectations, and that's an important thing. There have been a number of other long swords that I've gotten that didn't do that, that felt clubbish, that weren't as well put together, that required some concession or some extra work or something to do. This, I placed an order, and it did exactly what it said it was going to do in my eyes, and did it quite well. And to that, I think $1,168 is not bad. It's also worth pointing out, like, S5 is not cheap. Doing some of the custom-y special things is not an inexpensive way of going about things. So this is a special one in the sense that they offered something unique that I don't think I could really get anywhere else for the same amount of money. You can get something similar, but I don't think it'd be as good. So yes, I do, but you have to find value in what they do well. If you do, then I think absolutely it's worth it. Anyway, that's what I've got. Hopefully it was helpful. Thank you to the folks at Swordis for sending this my way. Thank you to the folks at Shadow Dancer for making cool stuff. That's all I've got. Cheers, and thanks for watching.